kind of rip off the PBS Idea channel, here's an idea. What if the history of art, as seemingly unrelated as it may sound, could help us understand what's going on with the controversy surrounding the Tropes versus Women in Video Games series? First, take a look at this picture. I'm sure many of you have seen it before, but do you know its name? If you said Whistler's Mother, you're wrong. The actual name of this picture is Arrangement in Gray and Black, number 1. Why is it named like this? Well, I think the answer can help us begin to understand the split between people over the Anita Sarkeesian videos. Before we start, I'd just like to say in this video, I don't think I'm going to be definitively answering anything about who's right or wrong, Anita or her critics, nor am I going to deal with everything everyone says. I'm just going to take the debate as a whole at a higher level of abstraction to see if I can get a clearer view of what's going on. Also, another aim in this video is to kind of find a way for people located at both ends of the spectrum to communicate. So first, I'd like to propose the idea that perhaps people on both sides of this debate are more similar than they may think, and that they share similar ideas. So in this video, I'm going to be mixing a lot of clips together from both sides to show maybe where they overlap and maybe where they can find points of discussion. Okay, let's get started. First, tell me if this story sounds familiar to you. A certain type of media is largely dominated by focus on emotion, imagination, and tales of heroic quests. Then, due to changes in society and technology, it starts to shift in content to a more and more real representation of the world around it. At the same time, it begins to assert its freedom and express itself more freely. People in other areas of society begin to fear potential harm caused by this media, criticize it, and even take action to censor it. As similar as this may sound to the state of gaming right now, this happened over 150 years ago to the art world when modern art was born. So for a while before this, the Romantic movement and neoclassicism had been dominant. Romantic art had a strong emphasis on intuition, emotion, imagination, and even narratives of a heroic struggle. Now, the golden age of gaming and the Romantic movement in art are definitely not perfect matches, but they do share some interesting similarities. Romantic art or novels often used to exaggerate to depict some kind of ideal person. They often use story material, not from our world only, but from supernatural worlds like the Greek gods. Their settings were often strange or unusual places.
Prior to the arrival of the NES on Western shores, saying that something looked like a video game usually implied that something looked vaguely futuristic with minimal design elements standing out in high-contrast neon against a sea of black space, i.e. Tron. But after the Famicom invasion, if someone said something looked like a video game, chances are they were talking about something that looked Japanese, or rather like the Japanese cartoon and comic book aesthetic that we only associated with video games. And hey, have you noticed that today if someone says, say, a movie looks like a video game, they're almost exclusively talking about meaningless spectacle or obnoxiously fetishized military hardware porn? Huh, wonder how that happened. Now, it's true that in the 80s and 90s, the mascot platformer genre produced a lot of titles that were basically just trying to piggyback on Sonic the Hedgehog. This is often held up as a yeah but to charges that too many games are just trying to be Call of Duty, but let's look at this objectively for a moment. Here are 4 screenshots from Modern Warfare 2, Battlefield 3, Ghost Recon, and Medal of Honor. Now obviously big fans can tell the difference between these at a glance, but let's be honest, there's an awful lot of sameness going on here. Not necessarily a negative criticism, just an observation. Now, here's 4 screenshots in no particular order for Bubsy, Brian the Lion, Arrow the Acrobat, and Awesome Possum, all of which are largely seen as following lockstep in Sonic's footsteps. Now, I'll grant that none of them are as remembered fondly as pinnacles of the genre, and for good reason, but just looking at them, you can tell there's a certain amount of visual distinction. Oddly, it seems as though this disparity results from a kind of ironic paradox. The tools and capabilities of the 8 and 16-bit era were so much more limited, designers were forced to stretch their imaginations and come up with new and different scenarios because that was the best way for a game to differentiate itself, whereas now game creators with a much greater set of tools are much less encouraged to push the envelope.
Video games also live in what I call Wonderland. They live in a dimension that is absolutely not connected to the real world. They're not connected to our reality. They talk about things that are totally unrelated to what we all know. It's not about people, it's not about our world. It's about a different dimension, a different world, something that I call Wonderland.
Way back since the Renaissance, a change had been taking place in society. It had begun to become more and more fragmented and specialized. For a long time, people were not just one thing like an artist, but were polymaths and participated in multiple fields. By the time the end of the Romantic movement was approaching, society had become almost totally specialized. Artists were people who mainly only trained in the art world. They had acquired a strong sense of their identity as artist. In a way, a kind of similar thing happened in a much shorter time frame with gaming. Game designer, for example, became something you could go to school for.
I mean, we forget this, but from the 80s up until the 90s, game design was basically the Old West. Wild, untamed pioneers showing up, making their own rules. I mean, you couldn't go to school for game design for the most part, and arcades, computers, and consoles needed a constant stream of product. People who wanted to make games came into the industry from different artistic, literary, and otherwise conceptual disciplines, and in lieu of reinventing the wheel for every game, they took the gameplay formulas they knew worked and built on top of them.
And not only in game design, the term gamer has also gained prominence as a kind of identity for those who play video games. So way back at the end of the Romantic movement and the beginning of modernism, one of the most important changes for the new artists was their taking hold of the idea of the aesthetic as a kind of separate domain of human life, separate from others such as the rational life or the moral life. Artists were then able to view what they do as something unique and fulfilling a unique human need that we have. Because of this, artists felt the importance of their work to be even greater, and they felt entitled to freely create work that fed into the human need for the aesthetic. Now, in our day, and in the gamer community, I'd like to suggest that we focus on, or we have grabbed onto the concept of play. And this will be really the locus of our agreement and disagreement over this Anita Sarkeesian issue. People on both sides of tropes versus women in video games generally, though, agree on this point, on the extreme importance of play.
But the gaming community constitutes all walks of life. Libertarians, Democrats, Republicans, blacks, straights, gays, whites, whatever. And in many ways, it's the ultimate non-discriminating and fair playing field. Which means in the sort of games that I play, when you get into the arena, the only thing that matters is can you shoot faster and more accurately than your opponent. That's the only thing that matters.
Almost invariably, trying to somehow bend gameplay consistently to match up with the concurrent narrative ends up undermining player agency, which is supposed to be the primary concern of most games. Yeah, sure, jumping back and forth over an NPC's head because I'm bored with their exposition makes the whole scenario look that much more absurd, but, well, it's a game. Being able to jump around like a goof because I want to is part of the reason I'm playing something instead of watching something. It's fun.
You fail to understand that we are doing this, yes, because we want to have fun and enjoyment, pure, selfish happiness in our lives.
We must remember that games don't just entertain, intentional or not.
No, that's all they do. All they do is entertain.
Always express a set of values.
No, they don't.
Present us with concepts of normalcy.
No, they don't.
So what do games that
No, they don't.
casually rely on depictions of female victimhood tell us about women vis-a-vis their place in society?
Recently, Rockstar revealed a Grand Theft Auto 5 gameplay demo showing us how the game works, what it looks like, etc, etc. You wanna know what I thought the best bit of the video was? It wasn't the sneak peek at GTA Online, it wasn't the tasty violence, it wasn't this guy flushing a foot down a toilet. No, it was the repeated use of the word fun.
Fun and responsive.
Whenever Rockstar justified a change being made to its controls or mechanics, it did so in the name of fun. It may seem like a bit of an obvious thing. I mean, most games, after all, in the mainstream are supposed to be fun, so it's not saying much that Rockstar is designing its game to, well, be fun. However, set against the backdrop of the current game industry, Rockstar stating something so simple, so pure, so fucking obvious is a breath of fresh air in a cum-stained jockstrap.
As we often like to talk about here on Game Show, games can do some pretty important stuff. For example, what if I told you that maybe games are saving the world from a generation of incompetent adults who are deprived of play at a very young age? I know this might sound ridiculous, but I think Minecraft is doing exactly that. I think, and this is just a theory, kids are attracted to Minecraft because it provides them the healthy types of play that they're not getting because their parents are sheltering them. Play does some really important stuff. For example, according to the emotion regulation theory, play helps kids control anger and fear. Evolutionary psychologist Ellen Sandsetter argues that we could see increased neuroticism and psychopathology if we prevent kids from being able to play. So over-nurturing instincts by parents today are creating this radically dystopian future populated by grown-ups who didn't get enough time in the sandbox. Can anything save us from this joyless nightmare? Well, maybe Notch could. After all, Minecraft has sold more than 50 million copies, and in many ways, Minecraft compensates for the valuable kinds of play that today's kids are missing out on. So there you go, the world's safe after all. Glad we solved that. But seriously, one big way that Minecraft does this is by offering unstructured play. Yes, there are rules, like 9 iron ingots are needed to craft 1 iron block, but outside of survival mode, there are no rules. I mean, you can do whatever it is that you want, like build the country of Denmark, or film a music video for Arcade Fire, or just mine. Child psychologists agree that unstructured play fosters important skills like creativity, decision-making, and independence. And German researchers at the University of Hildesheim found that kids with copious amounts of unstructured play go on to lead more successful lives. Pretty good so far, right? Another great thing that Minecraft does is it allows kids to engage in risky play. You're probably saying, hold up. Danger is bad, but risk-taking for children is actually advantageous. It's been shown that kids who expose themselves to dangerous play are actually using the same techniques as adults who try to overcome phobias. You may still be skeptical, and I totally understand. Minecraft is virtual. The biggest danger that you face is, I don't know, eye strain. But it doesn't matter if the activities are actually, in real life, dangerous. Sandsetter, again, says that kids just need to feel like they're taking risks.
Since these women are just objects, there's no need or reason for players to have any emotional engagement with them. Meaningful relationships or interactions are not even possible.
Yeah, you can't find out anything about the men in the dance clubs either, or form intimate relationships with them, because people who are playing these games are not there to develop meaningful relationships with the non-playing characters. They're mostly there to play games like this because it's fun to pretend to be a gangster, which is why the overwhelming number of those non-playing characters are men, and you're just meant to kill them for cheap thrills over a beer and then sleep like a baby with a big smile on your face at that epic killing spree.
Let's take things all the way back to Shigeru Miyamoto. He is someone who doesn't focus on, or sometimes doesn't even seem to want, story in his games. He just wants fun gameplay. Any kind of story he adds onto the games just seems to be built around the gameplay. In general, though, the stories he does add are fantastic and not of this world. But as gaming grew, so did technology, and games tried harder and harder to engage the player on more levels. Games started to incorporate 3D graphics to immerse you in the world. They also started to portray more and more real-world places. And their stories started to become more and more complex and touch on reality more and more. The art world also faced a similar kind of change after Romanticism. The realist movement was born. Realist artists did not paint idealized scenes or dramatize great men, but took it as their job to show us the real world that we live in, to kind of show us the world from a perspective, from their perspective. Courbet, one of the greatest and earliest realists, said the basis of realism is the negation of the ideal. The realists in general did not try to add any interpretation or any extra emotional meaning to their work. They just tried to represent the gritty reality.
This canvas, another image which shocked conservative critics at the Salon of 1853. Perhaps more than any other Courbet painting, The Bathers was perceived as shockingly ugly. Delacroix was critical of the work, though he was more concerned with the lack of meaning in the canvas than the obese, unidealized form of the central female figure. But the merits of Courbet's realism were now increasingly recognized.
As expression became freer and freer, people in other walks of life, politicians, the church, etc., began to fear the negative influence their art might bring, so they began to censor the artists. The stage was now set for the battle cry of artists who faced potential censorship. Art for art's sake. Among these artists was Whistler, the man who painted Arrangement in Gray and Black, #1, we saw at the beginning of the video. The demands of artists like Whistler, who supported art for art's sake, have an uncanny similarity to some of the things said in the Tropes versus Women in Video Games debate. I'm just going to quote here from the Dictionary of the History of Ideas about things those who held up the doctrine of art for art's sake believed, but when I read them, I'm going to change the word artist to gamer. Gamers inveigh against conventional bourgeois morality with its prudery and hypocrisy, and against all the measures through which the government, the church, and the press seek to impose this morality and suppress any deviations from it.
Basically, you would just like them to do the games the way you would like to see them done, which is very boring and stupid and sanitized and pussified and PG'd for your protection.
But the game stories we've been discussing in this episode do not center on or focus on women's struggles, women's perseverance, or women's survival in the face of oppression. Nor are these narratives seriously interested in any sort of critical analysis or exploration of the emotional ramifications of violence against women on either a cultural or an interpersonal level.
Right. Because the purpose is to have fun. And your magic princess pussy doesn't give you the right to dictate to the rest of us what we can and cannot use within our make-believe worlds. I can make believe about whatever the fuck I want, because it's my mind. And if I want to put my mind into this virtual world and play make-believe in the video game, that is none of your business. It is totally and completely morally acceptable for me to escape into my fantasy world and not constantly be inundated with lessons, with Sunday school lessons about your bullshit agenda.
They reject the claims of didacticism, refusing to acknowledge that their art should proclaim any moral truths or lessons.
These people have ruined this hobby. They have taken something that is meant as a form of entertainment, and they have strangled it. They've smothered it, and all their baggage, and all their psychological bullshit, and they just couldn't leave it be. They just couldn't let people play a video game and have fun. It had to have a deeper meaning. It had to be related to their fucking rights causes and their life's goals and ambitions. They took something that was fun and meant to entertain, and they have destroyed it.
Or maybe, just maybe, Anita, there isn't a fucking commentary, despite your best efforts to see one, because it's this thing called fiction. It doesn't need a fucking commentary. Video games are pieces of fiction. They are forms of entertainment. They are not pieces of social commentary. They are just forms of entertainment.
You could tell she has a serious distaste for Double Dragon. And yeah, okay, they sock her in the gut, they carry her away, it's violence against women, you see her underwear, I get that. But it's one of those things where it's like, it's telling a story, so technically it's art. It's telling a story that somebody created, so they're going to have aspects of it. It doesn't necessarily need to work itself into what you want it to be. It doesn't need to be anything more than what it is.
Such predicaments, including their capturings and kidnappings, only exist to further along the plotline and motivate the hero. It is in no way supposed to be any social statement saying that women cannot take care of themselves.
Even back in the day, when I was playing as part of a clan, we had the most incredibly diverse group I've ever been in. We had a gun nut libertarian, we had a progressive liberal, we had an immigrant Mexican, and a Republican police officer, and some Ivy League researcher. This was a group I would have never usually met or socialized with. But in the arena, none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was I knew these people played well, and I could trust them to cover me, especially in games like Capture the Flag. And that's why, as a clan, we played well, because we mostly understood that we were here to play the game, not to fight over political or social issues.
Finally, gamers reproach the sentimentality of the public, which looks not at their games, but merely at the objects, scenes, and events that these depict. That is, they resent the slavery of subject matter. And please look at this quote. I love this quote from Whistler on the gentle art of making enemies. And here he talks about how people don't look at his art. They look kind of through it. They don't see the technique and the color and the form. They look at, for example, the mother and not the patches of gray and black, which he put his work into.
It's a fucking game. You know, it's all the subtle giveaways, Anita, that there are no checkpoints in real life. You can't just respawn when you get killed in real life. You can't hunt humans for sport as an insectoid alien in real life. And in real life, there are no special bonuses for running over Elvis impersonators or Hare Krishnas. And in real life, hospitals are a damn sight better way of getting your health back than sleeping with prostitutes.
Yeah, once again, I would like to remind everyone that these are not documentaries. These are not anything but fucking fictional universes. And big fucking deal because these characters aren't, I don't know, fucking real.